All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Let us begin. I want to begin by thanking our sponsors, our Talmud Torah sponsors, for the month of Adar Aleph, to thank Paul and Kathy Pollack for dedicating all the Shurim and Drushos this month in memory of Paul's grandparents, Zechariah ben Zechariah and Dinah Bas from Dove, to thank Art and Sherry Miller for dedicating all of the Shurim and Drushos this month in memory of Art's brother, Richard Miller, Reuven ben Betzalel V'Rachel, and to thank our Daf Yomi sponsors, Alan and Sumairowitz, with a thank you to Hashem for all He has done for Alan and Sue's continued healing. We hope that the entire Meiritz Mishpacha, Meretz Hashem, has continued refuah and gesund ad 120 shanim tovos. But with that, let us begin. We have a beautiful, beautiful daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Yud Dalid. Let's say you'll notice again, by the way, I think you're feeling ready. In Chagigah, this is like a different kind of Agadata. Right? It's a very, very different type. I don't know that there's anything like this type of Agadata anywhere else in Shas. Certainly nothing else that we've seen so far in our journey. It's beautiful. There's some story, but it's so overlaid with such a level of esoteric ideas. Okay, but but it's an incredible journey. So also we are picking up on today's 14. We are picking up on 13b, and I believe we left off with Kasuv Echad Omer. So that is 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17 lines up from the bottom on 13b. So the Gemara says as follows: Kasuv Echad Omer. One pasuk says, Sheish Knafayim Le'echad. One pasuk says that each malach had 6 wings. Really what it means is like 6 sets of wings, 6 wings, right? Kasuv Echad Omer va'arba panim la'achas va'arba knafayim la'achas. The other pasuk says the malachim had 4 wings. So which one is it? Do malachim have 4 wings? Do malachim have 6 wings? Lo kashya, kan bizman shebeis hamikdash kayim, kan bizman she'in beis hamikdash kayim. Kivyachol shenismatu kanfei achayas. So it's a very profound Gemara. So the Gemara says one is talking about when the Beis Hamikdash stood, and one is talking about again when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. So apparently again the Gemara says when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the Malachim lost some of their wings. Such a profound idea. They lost some of their ability to do something, to fly. What we're going to discuss is, Rabbi say, Gemaras like this are so important because they highlighted an important dynamic, which is we often think that the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash is something that only impacted us. But we forget that the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash impacts everything in the universe. It impacts man, right? Jew, non-Jew. It impacts malachim, and it even impacts the Ribono Shel Olam in some way. So the Gemara says, hey, mina imit. So here's what's interesting. Which set of wings did the malachim lose? Because Rabbi said the assumption is malachim don't just have extra sets of wings just for wings purpose. Each set must serve some purpose. So which set did they use? Or in other words, what the Gemara is really asking is, what function did the malachim use upon the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash? Amrav Chanana Amrav, Osan Sha'omros Shira. I will say this is so beautiful. They lost the wings which are used to sing Shira. They lost their Shira wings. Now take a look at Rashi here for just a moment. It's actually quite beautiful. Rashi says, actually, first we have to read a little bit. So Rashi says, the Gemara goes on, Ksiv halcha obishtami ofei v'kara ze'el zeve amar, Ksiv hitif einecha bo ve'einenu. Suppose now look at Rashi for just a moment. Ubishtayim yufaf v'samach leikra el ze'el ze'alma hanach ninu da'amri b'hu shira. Now what does it mean they lost the wings with which they said shira, with which they sang? Listen to how beautiful this is. Shemakash kishos bekol knafehem ubahanach ksiv ve'einenu gabihitif. Apparently, through the flapping of their wings, the malachim produced beautiful melodic shira. When the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, they lost the wings for shira, which Rabbi says it's in and of itself is something so profound. What have we lost with the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash? What have we lost? To a certain degree, a certain ability to sing. Right? Now, Rabbi said that we sing, Baruch Hashem, we sing plenty, but what we sing, the way we sing, and how we sing has been fundamentally blunted and impacted by the absence of the Beis Hamikdash. If you think about this just a moment, as I was looking at this Gemara yesterday, my heart was so filled with joy because if you think about it, there are so many times, like, right, we just had this beautiful Shabbos here, the Shabbos of this Orus. We had a beautiful Kabbalah Shabbos and beautiful davening, and you feel sometimes so inspired by Shira, right? For many of us, music, Shira, has the ability to lift us up to levels that nothing else does. And that's the Shira of Gullus, right? That's the Shira of diaspora. Can you imagine what the Shira of the Beis Hamikdash is going to be like? The Shira of Mashiach is going to be like. Something absolutely amazing to contemplate. Rabbanan say, no, which wings did they lose? Osan shemechasos bahen ragleihem. This is interesting. They lost the wings that covered their legs. Shene'emar v'ragleihem regal yishara. Because the pasuk says, it's interesting, when Yecheskel describes the Malachim, he describes them as being one-legged, right? They had one straight leg. V'im lav de'imut menahaviyada. And so therefore again, had they not lost the wings that covered their legs, how would Yecheskel ever know what their legs looked like? In other words, the fact that Yecheskel knows what the legs of the Malachim look like indicates that they must have lost the wings that normally covered the legs. Well, maybe Dilma Digloi v'chazilei. Maybe just the Malach moved their wings, right, and their legs became revealed. That's how Yecheskel saw it. Because if you don't say this, Udmus Pnei Adam. Remember, Yecheskel also says that the faces of the Malachim are like the faces of a human being. Hachanami de'imet. You're going to say also that therefore the wings that normally cover their face were also taken away. Ela digloi v'chazilei. Rather, it has to be the way that Yecheskel saw the faces of the Malachim was how? Because the Malachim must have moved their wings, and therefore Yecheskel was able to see their face. So too, why can't you say that he was able to see their legs because they moved those wings as well? But lav dafka doesn't have to mean that they lost those wings. Hachi the Gemara says, here's the difference. Bishlama ape orech ara legaluye kamei rabbe. So it makes sense that the Malachim would reveal their face, because it's normal for a servant to reveal his face in front of his master. The Gemara says, Kar'eh lav orech ara legaluye kamei rabbe. When it comes to one's legs, right, it's not the normal derech of a servant to reveal his legs in front of his master. It must be, the Rabbanan will say, that the reason why Yecheskel was able to see the legs of the Malachim was because they lost that lower set of wings. So I'm just pointing out over here, here's what everyone's agreeing with. Everyone's agreeing that with the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, the Malachim lost a set of wings. It's an interesting discussion to a machlokes as to which set of wings did they lose. First opinion saying they lost the set of wings for Shira. Second set of wings, they lost the set of wings which covered their legs. So the Gemara says, Kasav Echad Omer Elef Alfin Yesham Shunei V'Rabu Reuven Kadmoi Yikumun V'Kasav Echad Omer Hayesh Mispar L'Gidudav. So both say, it's interesting. So one pasuk says Elef Alfin, which means thousands of malachim, and then the second pasuk says there's no way to count the legions of malachim. Right? So two psukim. So one seems to say a lot of malachim, but there's a number. Second pasuk seems to indicate too numerous to count. How do you reconcile the psukim? No kasha kan bizman shebeis hamikdash kayum kan bizman shebeis hamikdash kayum kiviyachol shenismata pamalyo shamal. Both say so. Same type of answer like we gave before. One is talking about again when the Beis Hamikdash stood, in which case the malachim were without number, and then one's talking about when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. The kiviyachol, the number of malachim has been diminished. So the Gemara says as follows: Tanya, Rabbi Omer Mishum Abba Yosi Ben Dosai, Elif Alfin Yish. I'm sorry. Good. So Tanya, Rabbi Omer Mishum Rabbi Yosi Ben Dosai, Elif Alfin Yisham Shunei Mispar Gidud Echad. Ulegidudav ein mispar. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba Amar Elef Alfin Yishmeshune Linar Dinor. So I'll say interesting. Comes along Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba and he says there's thousands of malachim. Where do they dwell or where do they serve God? By Nar Dinor. And I will say Nar Dinor literally means a stream of fire. A stream of fire. Shene Amar Nar Dinor Neged v'nafak min kadmoi elef alfin yisham shemune. So these malachim emanate and serve Hashem by this stream of fire. So the Gemara says, I'm sorry. V'rabu Reuven fine. Mehecha nafik. Ultimately, again, where does this come from? Where does this stream of fire come from? Mize asan shel chayos. It comes from the sweat of chayos. And I remember again, chayos are these higher form, almost highest form of malachim. So whatever this means, the sweat, right, the perspiration of the chayos creates this stream of fire. Ulehechan shafich. And where does the stream empty into? Right? Where does the stream empty into? Amarav Zutra Bar Tovya Amarav Arosh Rishaim Begehenam. Wow. Okay, so listen to this. So this stream of fire which comes from the perspiration of the malachim, specifically again of the chayos, empties into or empties onto the heads of the Rishaim of the wicked in Gehenna. Shneimar Hine Saras Hashem Chama Yatsa V'Sara Mischola Avrosh Rishaim Yachol. V'Rachar Yaakov Amar Ala Sher Komto. This is interesting. No, the river actually empties out onto the heads Asher Komto. I will say Asher Komto. Komto literally means those who were destined. Now we're going to see it refers to those who were destined to be created, but were never created. Created but were never created. What does that mean? Let's take a look. Shneimar Asher Komto V'Lo Eisna Yutzak Yisodam. Tanya. I will say, who are these people who were destined to be created but were never created? Amr b'Shimon HaChassid, Elu Teisha Meos v'Shivim v'Arba Doros, Shekamto Lihibaros, top of Yudalid, Kodem Shenivra Olam and Olam Nivra. Both say, listen to this. This is 900, listen to this. There were 974 generations that were supposed to be created, but were never created. If you take a look, yeah. So look at Rashi. Look at Rashi. Top Rashi in your Daled and Aleph. Kodem Shnivra Olam Nigzar Lem Li Baros Lios Kodem At Torah. The Kaima Shneimar Davar Tziva Li Elef Dar Ruuya Haisa Torah Li Hinosin Achra Elef Dar. Supposed to listen to this. In the original plan, both say Gemaras like this. I find them so inspiring. You'll see why in just a moment. In the original plan, the world was Torah was supposed to be given after 1,000 generations. There was supposed to be 1,000 generations of man, and then Torah was created. So then what happened? So the Gemara is explaining over here, HaKadosh Baruch Hu saw that 974 generations of man were going to be wicked. So what does he do? He gives it after 26 generations, right? So he removed 974 generations from the order of man. 974 generations. But so why is the Gemara like this so incredibly inspiring? Because so often in life, we have a plan, and then, amazingly enough, what happens? Life doesn't go according to plan. And for many of us, that is an incredible source of frustration and personal difficulty. And how affirming is it, by the way, that, newsflash, life doesn't go according to plan for HaKadosh Baruch Hu either, Kiviyachol, right? That even the King of Kings, right? Even the King of Kings starts out with a plan, and you know what? Doesn't exactly go the way he had anticipated it. Obviously, it's not to be understood literally because the Kadosh Baruch Hu operates on a different plane. But how there was supposed to be 1,000 generations. And the Kadosh Baruch Hu has to pivot because life is all about pivoting. He has to remove 974 generations because the original plan will say, sometimes in life you have a plan, and then you realize the plan's not going to work. So often we're faced with two possibilities. Possibility one is keep believing your plan's going to work, even though it's clearly not going to work, and just keep going. It's not working. It's going to work. It's not going to work. Keep going, or you could pivot, and the power to pivot is one of the most incredibly important tools in our personalistic toolbox in order to be successful in life. Those who cannot pivot simply stagnate. And from where do we learn the power to pivot? From HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Incredible. So says the Gemara, so I said, listen to this. So what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do with all of these people? Right? There are all of these neshamas that were supposed to come into the world. So what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do with all of them? This is incredible. So we're going to see some of them he just put in Gehenna. Right? I'll say, but interestingly enough, what he did is he dispersed them. He dispersed them. You see, here was the problem. Those 974 generations, there was such a concentration of wickedness that it would have been terrible for the world. So what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He disperses them. He dispersed them throughout time. B'chol dar v'dar. Listen to this. V'hein azei panim shebadar. So when you run into people who are real azei panim, right? Azei panim, right? Brazen, difficult individuals, right? Then those are one of. So we'll say, by the way, this is a great insult also. You're one of the 974, right? You're one of the 974, right? You can say, and only if somebody's learning the daf are they going to get that reference, right? You must be one of the 974s, right? So when you go ahead and you see people acting in you see it, sometimes we encounter this, like this type of behavior that's just, unfortunately we see this in our greater world all of the time, like this brazen behavior that's just so over the top. So ultimately, again, the Gemara says that's probably, all kidding aside, one of those neshamas. From Nachar bar Yitzchak Amar Asher Kumtu Lebracha Hu Dichsiv. So we'll say, Nachar bar Yitzchak says Asher Kumtu, that they were destined. This refers ultimately to bracha. Chas v'shalom, not to negativity. Dichsiv Eilu Talmidei Chachamim Shemekamtin Atzman al Divrei Torah ba'olam hazeh. We'll say this refers to Talmidei Chachamim, who literally, now in this context, Mekamtin means they cut themselves down. In other words, they work themselves to the bone over Torah in this world. HaKadosh Baruch Hu megalem sodi olam haba. HaKadosh Baruch Hu reveals to them the great secrets in the world to come. Let's we'll say, Shene'emar nar yotzek yisodam. So we'll say a very beautiful Gemara also, that greatness in Torah doesn't just come through learning. Greatness in Torah comes through working hard on your learning. It's a very important distinction. See, I could acquire knowledge through reading, right? It doesn't really require exertion. It just requires time. I sit down, I read, I acquire information, and then I could properly, hopefully, use that information in an effective way. To become great in Torah requires toil. That requires effort. That requires pushing myself. That requires inconveniencing myself. But at the end of the day, those who go ahead and literally wear themselves down through learning Torah, just understand that Kadosh Baruch Hu lifts them up to the highest of high in the world to come. Amar li Shmuel Lechia bar Rav, Amar li Shmuel Lechia bar Rav, bar Aryeh. Tell Emelech Amilsa Mehani Mal Yusuf the Hava Amar Avuch. So we'll say it's actually very beautiful. So Chia bar Rav says, so Shmuel says to Chia bar Rav, the son of the lion, let me tell you something beautiful that your father used to say. But says a very beautiful Gemara. Kol Yoma v'Yoma Nivrar Malachi Asharis Minar Dinar. Every single day, Malachim are created from the Dinar River. From the Dinar River, Nar Dinar. Now, both say, and I remember again, Nar Dinar is what we just made reference to, which literally means the stream of fire. Little Chazara. Remember again, where does that stream come from? Where does that stream come from? That stream comes from the perspiration of the Chayas, like we saw. Right? So every single day, Malachim are made from Nar Dinar. Va'amri Shira, the Malachim say Shira, right? They sing. Ubatli. And then ultimately, again, they cease to exist. They sing Shira and they cease to exist. Shene'emar Chadashim lebikarim Rabba emunasecha. The Rabbi says, just understand the profundity of that Gemara as well. What does it mean? The Malachim are created, they sing Shira, and then they cease to exist. So I will say two incredible lessons. Sometimes people or entities are just created to accomplish one thing in one moment. We like to think that life is filled with meaningful moments, and that's true. That's absolutely true. But sometimes we're just put in this world just to accomplish one thing in one moment. And all we need to do is live up to our potential in that one moment. Chas v'shalom, if we miss that moment, we run the risk of denying meaning to our entire existence. Sometimes there are malachim who are created just to sing Shira in one moment. That's lesson one. Lesson two, I will say, is that there's power in Shira. Sometimes, again, you could find incredible meaning just by beautiful words. Again, for the malachim, it's Shira. For us, what you could change in this world just with positive words, a word of compliment, lifting someone up, a word of encouragement, is literally a person could give meaning to their entire life and to the entire life of the person you're speaking to, just with words of shira. Upligid Reb Shlomo bar Nachmani, Reb Shlomo bar Nachmani, Rabbi Yona's son, called Dibur v'Dibur Shiot Tzimi Pi HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Nivra Mimenu Malach Echad. But listen to this. So this argues on Reb Shlomo bar Nachmani. Because why? The Gemara says, because Rabbi Yonason says that malachim don't come from Nar Dinor. Rather, where do listen to this? We're learning on Machlokes. Where do malachim come from? Where do malachim come from? So I will say, so the first opinion, Nar Dinor. Second opinion, no, they come from every dibur, every single thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says. Every time the Ribbon Shalom speaks, he produces malachim. So the Gemara says, Shnei Amar bidvar Hashem shamayim naasu uberuach piv kol tzivaim. So beautiful. Kasav echad omer levushay ketel chiyur v'searei ka'amar naka uksiv kitzososav taltalim shechoros ka'orev. So Rabbi said, this is so beautiful. The Gemara quotes here two psukim, which seem to give contradictory appearances of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. One describes HaKadosh Baruch Hu as having white hair, right? And the other appears to describe him as having dark black curls, right? So which one is it? Does the HaKadosh Baruch Hu have white hair? Does the HaKadosh Baruch Hu have dark hair? To which the Gemara says, Lo kashya kan be yeshiva, kan be milchama. This is incredible. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in yeshiva, so he has white hair. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu is out in war, he has black hair. Da amar mar, in lecha no'a be yeshiva ela zakein, ve'in lecha no'a be milchama ela bacher. Because Rabbi said, listen to this. The Gemara says, when you're in yeshiva, who do you want to see, sitting in front? Someone with white hair. It gives you confidence. This is a person who's Talmud Chacham. This is a person who's seen a lot in life. So in the yeshiva, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kiviyachal has white hair. Who do you want to see on the battlefield? Not a guy with white hair, right? What you want to see is the guy with dark hair, right? Strength and vitality and vigor. That's who you want on the battlefield. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu wears many hats and apparently has many heads of hair, right? And Lemais, again, has many different identities. And he actualizes those identities in different situations for different needs. So therefore, again, depending on the context in which there was the image of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, depended on how HaKadosh Baruch Hu presented. Very beautiful. Echad Omer, Kasav Echad Omer. What was the first line of the intermediate wide lines? Kasav Echad Omer, Karsi Shavivin Dinar, V'Kasav Echad Omer, Adai Karsun Rama Va'atik Yomin Yosef. So you have two contradictory psukim. One pasuk, well, it's the same pasuk. But in one part of the pasuk, it seems to indicate Karsei Shavivin, which means there's one throne. The second pasuk seems to indicate, or second part of the pasuk seems to indicate that there's two thrones. So which one is it? Does HaKadosh Baruch Hu have one throne or two thrones? So lo kasha. But get ready for this. Echad lo, the echad le David. Wow. Let's say one throne is for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the one next to him is for David HaMelech. Kedesanya. Echad lo v'echad leDavid divrei Rabbi Akiva. One throne is for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, one throne is for David HaMelech. These are the words of Rabbi Akiva. This is so incredible. Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Akiva, ad maseh ata oseh shechina chol. Akiva, what's the matter with you? Right? Why are you making the Shechina mundane? How can you say that a human being has a throne next to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Now, obviously, what they're describing over here is not the body of David HaMelech, but rather the neshama of David HaMelech. But still, you see Rabbi Yossi says to Rabbi Akiva, and he says, Akiva, what are you doing? How can you say that man has a throne next to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? So therefore, Rabbi Yossi has a different opinion. Elo, echad l'din ve'echad l'tzedakah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has two thrones, right? One is the throne of din, strict justice, and one is the throne of tzedakah, of kindness, of charity. So the Gemara says, Kibla minei or lo kibla minei? Did Rabbi Akiva, was he makabel what Rabbi Yosef Lili said or not? Tashma, echad l'din ve'echad l'tzedakah div Rabbi Akiva. So apparently Rabbi Akiva recanted, because now the Brisa quotes ultimately Rabbi Akiva saying HaKadosh Baruch Hu has two thrones, one for din, one for tzedakah. So we'll say, then they really gang up on Rabbi Akiva. Amar Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Akiva, malacha itel agada. Right? So listen to this. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah jumps on. He says, Akiva, stop wading into agadata. This is not your strong point. Your expertise is on sara'as and tumah. Wow, Moshe, listen to this. Can you imagine somebody? No, Agarata is not your thing, right? Saras, and Tuma, that's your thing. That's your thing. So say so. So first of all, it's actually an incredible idea. Let's finish the Gemara. Another opinion: one throne is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's throne. The other one really is his footrest, his footstool. The Gemara says, so the kisei is to sit on, and the footstool is exactly that, to put his feet on. Ultimately, again, the heavens are my throne, and the earth is my footstool. So we'll say machlokes. We'll say, just say something amazing. Two amazing things that come out of this Gemara. First of all, the idea that they tell Rabbi Akiva, stay out of Agarata and focus on Sara'as and Tuma, which I will say tells you something amazing. No person is a jack of all trades. It is an incredibly important thing. Most of us can't be excellent at everything. So often life is about figuring out what you can do and really become proficient. You still have to be able to do other things, but sometimes when we're on a quest to become excellent in everything, that's often an exercise in futility. No one, right? Think about this. Who do you know who's excellent in everything? People have strengths. And life is about honing your strengths and managing and trying to improve your weaknesses. Right? Rabbi Akiva tries to wade into the world of Agarata, and the Rabbanim say, that's not your strong suit. That's not your strong suit. You're excellent. You're Rabbi Akiva. But know your strengths, know your weaknesses. Very politely, what are they telling him? Stay out of this. Right? This is not really what you know. There are guys who know this, just like there are guys who don't know Negaim and Tumah. Right? Guys who don't know Negaim and Tumah. Right? So let's say right? There are people who shouldn't really comment on those topics. Right? So know what you know, and know what you don't know in life. That's number one. Number two, I will say it is amazing that it seems to be Rabbi Akiva comes around and says that the two thrones of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, one is for din and one is for tzedakah. Right? So one is for strict attribute of justice and one is for compassion. I will say there's an Avi Shaila, which is, why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu need two thrones? Right? In other words, I understand that there are two different midos. There's din and there's tzedakah, but why does there have to be two thrones? And perhaps what the Gemara is saying is as follows. I will say, how do you pivot? Once again, pivoting. How do you pivot from din to tzedakah? Right? How do you pivot from justice, from strict justice, ultimately again to compassion? How do you do that? And I will say, what's the answer? The answer is a change of perspective. Right? In order to pivot in life, often a person has to have a paradigm shift, a change of perspective. I have to look at things in a different way. I will say, it's interesting. We know this by Hilchos Avelos. An Avel is supposed to change his seat in shul. Why does an Avel have to change his seat in shul? So the classic answer is, I mentioned this in a different context, I don't remember when, maybe I guess in Moed Katan. So the classic answer is, Gesher Chaim brings down, because if Chas Shalom, the Avel is deserving of Galus, the changing of seat should be like Galus. But Rabbi Dr. Maurice Lamb brings his beautiful book called Consolation, and he explains in there, very beautiful idea, he explains that death is a disorienting experience, right? When a person loses a loved one, it changes the way you view the world. Everything changes in my perceptions. So we'll say, what's the power of having a makom kavua? The power of having a makom kavua is you have a set perspective in the way you see things, right? I come into shul, I have my seat, I put on my tefillin, I daven, I learn. There's a set perspective. Death disorients that perspective. I change my seat in order to highlight this change of perspective that I have. Changing your makom gives you a different perspective on things. And perhaps what the Gemara is teaching us is as follows. HaKadosh Baruch Hu changes from din to rachamim, from rachamim to din, not in the same chair. He changes thrones. Because in order to pivot between compassion and justice, you have to change your perspective. You have to change the way you look at things. And I will say, it's incredibly important for us as well, because we also have to pivot and move and vacillate between justice, between strict justice and compassion. People wrong us, we want to forgive. Right? People do things wrong, we want to be able to move on. People say sometimes, or I see someone do something wrong, I want to see the good. In order to be able to do that, you have to be able to change your perspective in life. Without a change of perspective, often you can't work through the difficulties in life. That's the movement from one throne to the other. HaKadosh Baruch Hu changes perspective in order to move from din terachamim. We have to change perspective sometimes in order to be able to move on in our relationships with others and in order to be able to move on in our relationships with ourselves as well. Credible Gemara. The Gemara goes weiter. Ki asrav dimi amar shmon esrei klalos kila yishai es Yisrael. So we'll say this is really an overwhelming Gemara. So the Gemara says that Yeshayahu Hanavi gave Klal Yisrael 18 curses. 18 curses. Well, what it means is he highlighted 18 punishments that were going to go ahead and befall the Jewish people as a result of their derelict behavior. And what happened? Velonis karara daito ad she'amalahem amikra hazeh. Now we'll say, now here the lashon is very strange. We'll get into this. Velonis karara daito means that literally he was not calmed, right? Or he was not, he was not calmed, right? Until he said this last punishment. Ad she'amalahem amikra hazeh yarhavu hanar bizakein vanikla benechbad. The youth, the child, or the young man will dominate the elder, and ultimately, again, the one who is despised will overcome the one who is respected. So I will say, this is the last of the punishments, that essentially, again, the youth will overtake the old, and the ones who are base will overtake the ones who are respected. Now I will say there's a whole Torah, I'm going to come back to it. Panovich Shurav has a magnificent insight into this. But let's first understand what the 18 klalos are, because it'll give us a little bit more perspective. So the Gemara goes right to listen to this. So Shmona say klalos ma. What are these klalos? What are these supposed to say? I just want to be clear. Yeshayahu Hanavi he's not cursing Klal Yisrael. Yeshayahu is telling Klal Yisrael what is going to happen as a result of their negative behaviors. T'chsiv, ki hine ha'adon Hashem tzivakos, meisir miYerushalayim. So here's what's going to happen. Because Hashem is going to remove from Yerushalayim, ume Yehuda, mishan u'mishaneh. Right? A source, right? Mishan is someone to lean on. Mishaneh, a source of support. Kol mishan lechem, any support of bread. V'chol mishan mayim, any support of water. We'll explain what all of these terms mean. Gibar, strong ones. Ishmael, Chama, men of war. Shofet, judges. Navi, prophets. Kosem, we'll say now Kosem literally means like a diviner, right? Someone like a sorcerer. We'll see what that means. Zakein, old man. Sar Chamishim, we'll say Sar Chamishim is usually again a term that's used to connote leadership, right? Unesopanim, people who are respected. V'yoetz, people who give counsel. V'chacham charashim, and a wise man amongst the wise men. V'navon lachash, someone who's able to go ahead and is wise and dispense advice. V'nasati, and both say as a result, after all of these things, so this is essentially what Yeshayahu Hanavi is describing, is that all form of wisdom and leadership is going to be removed from Klal Yisrael. And instead, what will be replaced with? V'nasati narim sarehem, I will make young men their leaders. V'ta'alulim yimshalu bam. Ta'alulim also means people who mock, right? Mockers will become the leaders, will rule over them. So we'll say, let's go through each of these. Mishan, what does Mishan mean? Elu bale mikra. We'll say Mishan refers to people who know Chumash. Mishana, elu bale Mishnah. This refers to people who know Mishnah. Kigon, Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema v'chaverav. Like Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema and his friends. We'll say, isn't this incredible? You talk about today, people who know Mishnayos, right? So we'll say today, you say, someone knows Mishnayos. You say to yourself, okay, great, what are they, in 5th grade, right? You know Mishnayos? We'll say, I'll tell you, one of the humbling experiences of doing Mishnah Yomi, for those of us who do Mishnah Yomi, is it's not easy, right? It's not easy to do Mishnayos, right? And it's easy to do Mishnayos. It's not easy to know Mishnayos, right? We're learning Maseches Peah now. We're going to finish Maseches Peah this week. Hard Masechta, right? To really know Mishnayos, to really understand Mishnayos. So Bali Mishnah, to know Mishnah, it's like Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema and his friends. Pligo bo Rapapa Rabban. And Chad Amar, also listen to this. Sheish meo sidrei Mishnah, the Chad Amar Shva meo sidrei Mishnah. Also listen to this. So there's machlokes. One thing we know for sure is right now we have 6 sidarim of Mishnah. There used to be more. How much more? One says 600 starim of Mishnah. One says 700 starim of Mishnah. Now, both say that doesn't have to mean that literally again there's 100 times more information. What it could also mean is things were divided up differently. There was definitely more information. It also could mean things were divided up a little bit differently. But the point over here is, when they speak about Bali Mishnah, they're talking about Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema, who mastered 600 orders of Mishnah, 700 orders of Mishnah. Kol Mishan Lechem, support of bread. What is that? Elu Bali Talmud. That refers to people who know Gemara. Shene'emar, l'chu lachmu b'lachmi v'shasu b'yayim masachti. V'chol mishan mayim. What's mishan mayim? Those who support, right? Support of water. So elu ba'ale agada. I will say this refers to people who know agadata. Shemoshchin libo shel adam kimayim. I will say, why is agadata called water? Because I will say, agadata called heart to flow like water, right? Man of war. This refers to someone who knows how to engage in the battle, the back and forth of Torah. Shofet Zedayon. This refers to a judge. I'm sorry. Zedayon Shadan Din Emes Lamito. This refers to a judge who's able to adjudicate cases properly. Navi Kimashmo, a prophet, just like what it says, a prophet. Kosem. What's a kosem? Ze Melech. This refers ultimately again to a king. Shene'emar, kesem al sifsei melech. Zakein. What's zakein? Ze sharoi liyeshiva. This refers to someone ultimately again who is fit to be in yeshiva. Sar chamishim, al tikri sar chamishim, ella sar chumshin. I will say, don't read this as a master, as a leader of 50, but rather as a master of chumash. Right? Sheodea lisav litin bechamisha chumshei Torah. I will say someone who knows chumash. Someone knows chumash. Davar achar sar chamishim. What does it mean? Kid Rabbi Avo. Don Rabbi Avo. Mikan she'in ma'amidin mitorgaman ala tzibar pachos michamishim shana. We do not establish a turgaman abose. Remember again, the turgaman is the person, right? The Rav, the Talmud Chacham would get up, say the shir, and the turgaman would go ahead and take the words of the Rebbe and distill it for the masses. We do not give a turgaman to a Rav, to a Talmud Chacham who is less than 50 years old. Right? If you're not 50, you don't get a turgaman, right? You have to reach a certain age of respectability in order to get a turgaman. Unaso panim, someone who's respected. Zeh shenosim panim ledoro ba'avuro lemala. But it's so beautiful. This is someone whose generation is respected in the celestial sphere because of this person. Kigon, Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. Abosa, listen to this. We know the beautiful Gemara Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa back in Tainus, that the Gemara says a Baskol came out and said, Kala olam nizon b'shol Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. Right? In Shemayim, they said the entire world is sustained because of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa. So Naso Panabosa means a person who's so respected in Shemayim, that his entire generation is supported, or I should say respected, in his merit as well. Lemata, it could also refer ultimately again to a person whose generation is respected here on this earth because of this individual. An example of that, Kigon, Rabbi Avo be Caesar. Like Rabbi Avo, who was respected by the Caesar, and because Rabbi Avo was respected by the Caesar, ultimately again the Jewish people were taken care of as well. Yoetz, what does Yoetz mean? Sheodeh la'aber shanim. He knows how to intercalate the years. V'likboa chadashim, to establish the months. V'chacham, zeh tamid hamachkim es rabosai. Rabosai said, it's interesting. What's a chacham? Chacham is someone who makes his teachers wiser. Such a beautiful idea. Right? He makes his teachers wiser. Charashim, so the Gemara says, Charashim, Torah, Hakol Naasa Kecharashim. So ultimately, again, Charashim means that someone who's so wise that when he opens up his mouth with Torah, everyone else falls silent because they want to hear what he has to say. V'navon, what's a navon? Zehamevin davar mitoch davar. This is someone who's able to understand one thing from another thing. In other words, both say he's able to extrapolate knowledge from things that he learned and apply to other things. Lachash, zeshrai limsralo divrei Torah shenis nabelechisha. Lachash. Lachash means someone who is so righteous that he himself would deserve to receive Torah, which was given in silence. What does this mean? So the Gemara is fine. So we'll say, so therefore again the Gemara says, what it means over here by the Torah was given balachash. We'll say this is the kol de mamadaka. That as much as there was kolim and brokos, lightning and thunder by Matan Torah, there was also this moment of complete and utter silence where the entire universe was still. So we'll say, what do you see over here? What are the curses of Yeshaya? What are the curses? Essentially, every vestige of leadership and Torah leadership will be removed from Klal Yisrael. That's what's happening. And what will it be? Bless you, what will it be replaced with? V'nasati na'arim sarehem. Here, I will make young men your leaders. My nasati na'arim sarehem. Amar Belazar, elu b'nei adam sheminu arim min ha-mitzvos v'ta'alulim. Sorry, so say na'arim means people, not just youth. It means people who are empty from mitzvahs. That all of this Torah leadership will be removed and replaced with people who are a spiritual vacuum, who are spiritually empty. V'ta'alulim yimshalu bam, and mockers will go ahead and rule over them. Amar Rav Papa bar Yaakov, v'tali b'nei tali. Ultimately, again, there'll be foxes, the son of foxes. Just like Rabbi say, a fox is a sly animal. So all of the leadership of Klal Yisrael will be replaced ultimately again with these empty and sly individuals. And yet, despite all of that, v'lo niskara daito ad she'amar lahem yirhavu hanar bizaken v'nikla b'nechbad. And yet, Rabbi said, despite saying all of these curses, Yeshayahu was not calm. Right? He wasn't calm, or he wasn't content. Rabbi said, we're going to see. We'll talk about the Panovich Rav. What is he? Yeshai wasn't content, but he wasn't content. He wasn't content until he said the following. Until he said, he wasn't content. Ad she'amar lahem yirhavu anar bezaken v'nikla b'nachar elu b'nei adam shemra b'netzas yirhavu b'mi shemamula b'mitzvos karimon v'nikla b'nechbad yavo mishech hamuros. So again, he wasn't content until he said ultimately again, the ones who are empty from mitzvahs will rule over those who are filled with mitzvos. V'nikla b'nechbad, the one who, right, what does that mean? Yavo mishech hamuros domos alav kekalos. Let the one who Rabbi say treats severe averos like light averos, v'yaharvu b'mi shekalos domos alav kechamuros, and will rule over the one who treats simple averos or light averos like the most severe averos. So we'll say we're going to come back to this sugya to discuss why. Okay, now we understand all of the curses, but what does it mean that Yeshayahu, he wasn't content, right? Or he wasn't tranquil until he said this last. We'll see what that means. Amar Rav Katina, afilu b'shas kishlon shel Yerushalayim lapaska mehem bali amar. Abbas is incredible. Even when Yerushalayim, even b'shas kishlon, even during the downfall of Yerushalayim, the one thing that Yerushalayim always had was truth, was people who were Ba'alei Emunah, truthful people. Listen to this. Shnei Amar, ki yitbos ish ba'achiv beis aviv leimar, simla lecha, katzin tiya lanu. Dvarim shebnei ad. So let's listen to this. So the pasuk over the Gemara quotes the pasuk. The Gemara quotes the pasuk from Yeshayahu. Right? One man, ki yitbos ish ba'achiv beis aviv. A man will take hold of another person from his family. Simla lecha, you have a simla, you have the cloak. Katzin tiya lanu, be a ruler for us. So we'll say, now what does this mean? So the Gemara says, during the downfall of Yerushalayim, what's going to happen? So what's simla? Dvarim shebnei adam miskaseh kisimla yeshna tachas yadecha. One person will go over to another and they'll say, you know what? You have the thing that people wear like a cloak, right? You possess that thing. And we'll say, that refers to Torah knowledge, right? So one person will go over to another person. They're going to say, you possess Torah knowledge. One person will say to another, you possess Torah knowledge, right? Reuven goes over to Shimon. Shimon, you possess Torah. You have the cloak of Torah. You have the thing over which people stumble, because the only way to acquire Torah knowledge is to stumble over it. Lo tisimeni katzin am. And then again, so we'll say Reuven goes over to Shimon, says to Shimon, Shimon, you possess the simla, you've stumbled over Torah, you should be our leader because you're a Talmud Chacham. And what will Shimon respond? Shimon will respond and he'll say, I will not be the ruler, I will not be the ruler. Ultimately, again, I don't have bread in my home, and I don't possess the cloak. What does that mean? Yisa ein yisa ela lashon shvua shneimar lo sisa shemesh alakecha lo eyachovish lo ayisi mechovshe beis hamedrash. I will not be a leader. In other words, I was not one who was captured in the Beis Medrash. In other words, I am not a person who has spent time in the Beis Medrash. And in my home, there's no bread, there's no garment. She'ein biyadi lo mikra, v'lo mishnah, v'lo gemara. I possess no knowledge of Chumash, no knowledge of Mishnah, no knowledge of Gemara. The Dilma shiny us. So says, now listen to this. What do you see from here? That even during the downfall of Yerushalayim, the one midah they possessed was truth. With truth, sense of emes, that one will try to make another right. Reuven, go over to Shimon. Shimon, you should be our leader. You possess Torah, and Shimon will respond. No, I don't. No, I don't. See, even during the downfall of Yerushalayim, the one thing we possess is the midah of emes. So much to say about that as well. So the Gemara says, Dilma shiny hasam, di amr luhu gamirna, amr emerlan. So I'll say maybe it's different over there. They're not really truthful. It's just here's the difference. Torah knowledge is kind of the one thing you can't lie about. Why? Because if somebody asks you a question and you don't have the answer, then what? Clearly you don't have the knowledge. But maybe they can say, Ema, havalan lememar gamar v'shachach. No, you can always cover that by saying, oh, I knew it, but I forgot. Yeah, I know the answer, but I can't remember it right now. So the Gemara says, "My Elo'eh Yechovish, Lo'eh Yechovish klal, inivam rava, lo charvi Yerushalayim ad shepaskem en abali amona." But say, here's the problem. The Rava says Yerushalayim was only destroyed. Why? Because it didn't have bali amona, which sounds like Rabbi say one of the things fundamentally lacking in Yerushalayim at the time of its destruction was what? Truth. And here you're saying truth was a pillar of Yerushalayim. Shnei Amar. Shotatu b'chutzos Yerushalayim ureuna udu ubikshu b'chavoseh im timtzu ish im yesh oseh mishpat mevakesh emuna ve'eslach la. And the here the pasuk seems to be pretty explicit, right? The pasuk over here once again. This is now in Yirmiyahu. Yirmiyahu essentially says, go out to the streets and find a man of truth. Find a man of truth. If you could find a man of truth, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I will forgive Klal Yisrael. So Rabbi says, see, there's no truth. Lo kasha, there's no contradiction. Amud Beis, ha b'divrei Torah, ha b'divrei masa umatan. Rabbi say, here's the difference. There was no man of truth to be found in business. No one was honest in business. When it came to Torah, they were truthful. In other words, they were truthful in what they knew and what they didn't know. But in business, you could not find a truthful man. Rabbi say, I'll just point out, it's interesting to note that truth was lacking during the times of the Churban. Because if you think about it just a moment, we all make mistakes, right? And we all make terrible mistakes. In order to be able to do tshuva, what do you need? What do you need? A sense of truth. If I'm not honest with myself about what I've done and what I haven't done, what I am and what I'm not, there's absolutely no way to turn it around. I'll say it's such an incredible use. So think about this. I would say many of us have things that are broken inside of us that we have not that we haven't fixed. And a lot of times the reason we haven't fixed it is because I'm not really honest about the problem. I'm not really honest about the problem, right? I acknowledge it's a problem, but either I explain it away or I find for it, it's this, it's not really a problem, it's actually something positive. I look at it as a good trait, I'm a tzaddik. But this right says we get very creative with the way, and the problem is we don't make change in life because I'm not honest about what it is that I need to change. Without emes, there's no tshuva. And without tshuva, of course, there's no change. So it's dramatic to see that what Yirmiyahu laments the most on the eve of destruction is, I can't find any emes. I can't find any emes. I can't find truth. And because there's no truth, Yirmiyahu Navi says, there's no real hope for this people. A people without truth is the people without tshuva. People without tshuva is the people without the possibility for change. We'll say, what a lesson for us. If we could just find the courage to be truthful about our faults and about our failures and about our shortcomings, which we all have, if we were just truthful about it to ourselves, not to anyone else, to ourselves, then that would be the first step to affecting change. The Gemara goes right to TORAH Abanon. Ma'aseh Yochanan, I say, great. I don't know. It's overwhelming to do these Gemaras. We'll say, listen to this. Now some good old Agarata. Just some stories. No malachim, no fiery rivers, no perspiration from chayis, no ma'aseh merkava. Just a bunch of good rabbanim sitting around and giving stories. So listen to this. Here we go. TORAH Abanon. Once Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was riding on a donkey. You know, this is going to be a good. Whenever it starts out with a great man on a donkey, this is good. This is good. And I will say, by Chasidish Shammai Salach, you know, whenever it starts out with Chasidim in an inn, that's how every story starts. The Chasidim were in an inn, right? They were in the inn, they were talking. So in the Gemara there's a Tana on a donkey. Once you have a Tana on a donkey, we're good. Right? So I will say, so there's a Tana on a donkey, right? Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is on the donkey, via Mahalech b'derech, and he's traveling. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach mechamer achrav. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach ultimately again was following. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, remember again, is reckoned in Pirkei Avos as one of the primary talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had many talmidim. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach was one of the 5 primary ones. Okay, so what happened? We're supposed to listen to this. Amar lo Rebbe, Shanali Parak Echa Ma'aser Merkava. So listen to this. They're traveling, and as they're traveling, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach turns to his Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rebbe, can you teach me a little something in Ma'aser Merkava? Teach me a little something in Ma'aser Merkava. Amar lo, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, Lokach shanisi lochem v'lo Merkava b'yachid. It's a Mishnah. It's a Mishnah. You're not allowed to teach in Ma'aser Merkava to one student, right? So Amar le ela imkein hayelo chacham mevi midaito. Unless, of course, the chacham understands Ma'aser Merkava on his own. So fine, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach is supposed to listen to this. Amar lo, Rebbe, tarsheni lomar lifanecha davar shili maratani. Rebbe, permit me, this is now Rabbi Elazar ben Arach speaking to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rebbe, permit me to share with you something about Ma'aser Merkava that you taught us. In other words, apparently, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had already taught them something about Ma'aser Merkava. So now Rabbi Elazar ben Arach says, Rebbe, can I share with you something that you had previously taught us? Amar lo, Emor. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, of course. Miad, Yard Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai me'ala chamar. But listen to this. So now right before they start learning, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai gets off the donkey, and he goes and he wraps himself in his talis and he sits on a rock underneath the olive tree. Rabbi will say all of this is incredibly symbolic and metaphor. It's literal, but there's so much symbol. We'll see if we have time. We'll see all of this. So we'll say so again. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is about to get this teaching of Ma'aser Merkava from his Talmud. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach is about to tell Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai something Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai taught them. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai gets off the donkey, wraps himself in his talis, sits down on a rock underneath the olive tree. Amar lo Rebbe, mipnei ma yaradta me'ala chamar. So again, Rabbi Elazar ben Arach says, Rebbe, why did you have to get off the donkey? Amar afshar ata dorish Ma'aser Merkava ushchina imanu umalochi asharis mulavano sanu. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, my dear Talmud, you're about to talk about Ma'aser Merkava, and Ma'aser Merkava is going to bring down the Shechina, is going to bring Malochi Asharis. They're going to be with us. Vani erkav ala chamar, and I should ride on the donkey. So let's get ready for this. Miyad pasach Rabbi Elazar ben Arach ben Ma'aser Merkava v'darash. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach begins to talk about Ma'aser Merkava. Now, both have to be clear. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach is talking about things that he learned from Yochanan ben Zakkai. He's retelling his Rebbe that which he learned. And he begins to dash. Rabbi say, listen to this Gemara. V'yarda eish min hashamayim. A fire came down from the heavens. V'sivava kol ha'ilonos shebesadeh. And ultimately what? It begins to encircle all of the trees in the field. Paschu kulan va'amru shira. The trees began to sing shira. Ma shira amru. What shira did they sing? Hallelu as Hashem min haaretz taninim v'chol tohomos eitz pri v'chol arazim. He will say, let the entire world call out in shira to Hashem. Let the entire world call out, including who? Eitz pri, the fruit trees. He will say, olives are considered to be fruit trees. Let them all call it Haluka, Na'ana Malach min ha'esh. I will say a Malach comes out from the fire. Va'amar Hein Ma'aser Merkava. Right? And ultimately the Malach says, the loose translation, Zayir gut. Right? You're saying good. You're saying good. Right? That's Ma'aser Merkava. I will say, can you imagine that? Right? Rabbi Elazar ben Arach is saying over Ma'aser Merkava, and the Malach comes out of the fire. Right? Can you just imagine? Fire's coming down from the heavens, circling the olive trees. The olive trees are talking, right? The olive trees are singing Shira. The Malach comes out to the fire and says, that's Ma'aser Merkava. Well, listen to how beautiful this is. Amar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, v'nashka al rosho. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai got up and he kissed his Talmud on his head. V'amar, Baruch Hashem Elokei Yisrael, shenasan ben li'Avram Avinu, sheodea lahavin v'lachkar v'lidrash ma'aseh. Listen to how beautiful this is. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai gets up and he gives his Talmud a kiss on his head. And he says, Baruch Hashem, blessed are you Hashem, the God of Israel, who has given a son to Avram Avinu, who understands how to go ahead and darshan Ma'aseh Merkava. We'll say this was the bracha that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai gave to his Talmud, Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch. And then he says, Yeshna, listen to how beautiful this is, Yeshna doresh ve'ina mekayim. We'll say there are some people who know how to give a nice shir, right? They know how to darshan very nicely. There's only one problem. They don't practice what they preach. And there are some people, there are some people who practice wonderfully, but they don't know how to, they can't convey Torah in an appropriate way. Ata, listen to this compliment that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai gives his Talmud. Ata, no'a doresh, no'a mekayim. You are both say the highest compliment anyone could ever give a Jew. You, Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch, no'a doresh, you darshan beautifully, but just as beautifully as the way you darshan is the way you live. You learn beautifully and you live beautifully. I will say, isn't this what we aspire to? No'a doresh, no'a mekayim. I want to learn beautifully and I want to live beautifully. I want to learn the beautiful Torah, but I want to take what I learn and I want to live it as well. Ashrecha Avraham Avinu, She'elazar ben Aruch yatsa mechalatzecha. Right, blessed, right, praiseworthy are you, Avram Avinu. That's such an offspring, that you have such offspring like this, like Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch. Say, is there a story more beautiful than this? First of all, a relationship between a Rebbe and a Talmud, right? Where a relationship between a Rebbe and a Talmud, and we now, sometimes you spend your life trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do in life? Like, right, what's many of us, like you walk around all day, like, what am I supposed to do with my life when I grow up, right? What am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to do? And the truth is, to a certain degree, I still don't know, but Lamaisa, we're a little bit closer. You know what I'm supposed to do? No'a doresh, no'a mekayim. What I'm supposed to do is learn beautifully, live beautifully. Learn Torah, share my Torah with others, and that's all of us. Learn my Torah, share my Torah with others, and use my Torah to inform the way that I live. No'a doresh, no'a mekayim. And if I do that, then I give my Alder Zayda Avram Avinu incredible nachas. We'll say the Gemara goes on. It's just incredible. We'll say, and when Rabbi Yeshua heard this story, so the Gemara says, Hayohuv Rabbi Yossi HaKohen Mahalchim Baderech. So I'll say, he and Rabbi Yossi were also traveling on the road. And they said, you know what? Amru, Af Anu Nidrash B'Ma'aseh Merkava. You know what? It's a good idea. If Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch, they learned Ma'aseh Merkava, they were traveling, let's also learn Ma'aseh Merkava. Pasach Rabbi Yeshua v'Darash. Rabbi Yeshua began to dash Ma'aseh Merkava. Os hayom Tukufas Tammuz haya. Both say it was Tukufas Tammuz. I both say Tukufas Tammuz is summertime. V'nis kashru shamayim ba'avim. The sky became filled with clouds, which I will say is unusual during the summer. V'nira kimin keshes ba'anan. And they saw something like a rainbow. Now the Maharsha says like a rainbow, but not a rainbow. Why? Because remember, the rainbow itself is normally not a good sign. Right? The rainbow is usually a sign of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's displeasure. They saw something like a rainbow. And I will say, what happened? The Malachim gathered around to watch them go ahead and learn. Right? To watch them do Ma'aseh Merkava. Ultimately, again, like people come to watch a Chagigah. I'll say, no, to have to stop, we're out of time. We'll pick up with this story. Miras Hashem. Tomorrow we'll say, Ashreinu matol chelkinu mana'im gorleinu ma'afai Yerushaseinu. Ashreinu shanachnu mashkimim to learn Torah like this. We'll say shkoyach. Have a good day, everyone. Shkoyach.